Hi guys, I am here with Shawn Wells.
Hello.
We're gonna do a little live. This is kind of like last minute, spur of the moment. So if you guys have any questions, we're gonna be really covering a lot of topics, but talking mostly about why isn't that? Diet, nutrition, supplements. I get so many questions on what is my diet? What do I think about what I should be eating, what supplements I should be taking, all this other stuff. And the reality is I don't answer a lot of those questions because I'm not the expert in it. So I like to bring you guys experts in the field. And Shawn, can you just give a background of yourself?
Yes, I am a registered dietitian.
Can you hear us? I just want to hold it now.
I can hold it. I'm a registered dietitian, a biochemist, a certified sports nutritionist. I'm a fellow in the ISSN. I have formulated supplements for about 20 years. I'm known as the world's greatest formulator. And I've been keto for about 20 years. So I do fasting, keto, paleo, and I worship Doc Gen Fit.
I don't know about that. So he has tons of information. So I want you guys to kind of ask us questions as well. We're going to flow into it. So you were obese.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
And you had a lot of autoimmune issues. What kind of autoimmune issues?
Epstein-Barr virus, chronic fatigue syndrome, Hashimoto's, fibromyalgia, all that stuff.
Wow. And how did you start to say, because were you already a dietitian when you had these things?
I was studying to be a dietitian,
Okay.
but I already had obesity, depression, suicidal thoughts, all that
There's a
stuff.
spider on your shoulder.
It's okay.
That would freak me out. Okay, so you were studying to be this, but you didn't know a lot of how this related to the autoimmune issues?
100%, yeah.
Oh, now it's on this side. It's right there. Oh, get away. Okay, we're back. I can't do
She doesn't like spiders.
Now I'm going to be freaked out. It's going to be around. Okay.
So, is L-carnitine tartrate safe? It is. I
What
just
is
don't
that?
think it's very effective. It's an amino acid derivative. L-carnitine is associated with what's called a fatty acid shuttle into the mitochondria to deliver fatty acids energy for the mitochondria. So people associate it either with improved performance if you're athletic or fat loss. But the data just isn't very good with L-carnitine. I like acetyl L-carnitine for the brain, but not L-carnitine for fat loss.
Interesting. Okay. So what are the first steps in terms of how someone can start to address things like all of those autoimmune issues that you had? What are beginning steps if someone's feeling really frustrated in terms of I have a lot of friends that even have psoriasis and stuff like that. And there's so many different things out there of what we hear and what we should do and who we should go to. What are initial steps that you recommend for people?
I think people are going to be looking for the magic bullet, and they're going to want the supplement or the exercise or give me my 23andMe results and tell me what I need to be doing in terms of this blood test or that blood test, take this medication. But really, you have to wonder why all these autoimmune things are happening. And I was obese because I dealt with a lot of abuse, psychological issues, things growing up, and so I medicated myself with sugar and junk food and all that kind of stuff. And I think that highly correlates the stress, the sugar with what happened with my autoimmunity. So, some of the things that I would say, first off, is people talk about being authentic, but to be authentic, you need to be self-aware, and you need to dig into your story and come to terms with it, own it, deal with it. Therapy.
It's back. Oh my gosh.
And
maybe we should sit over there again.
It's Spider Central.
Spiders are around here, guys.
Yeah. So I think it's important to to deal with that first, and then deal with diet, like, and not necessarily removing every single thing from your diet and doing something that's way too hard for you, but being aware of like what are triggers in your diet, things that are like maybe things that you feel inflammation for, yes, like, or some of those things if you're savvy enough, but what are the things that you reach for to medicate? Is it alcohol? Is it sugar? Is it, McDonald's? Like, and just being aware of those things, that can be very powerful. Those things are the stress, the cycle that you're in is probably what's a big part of the autoimmunity. I mean, there's things I could say beyond that, like autoimmunity is tied to like mitochondrial health, and there's things like keto, like paleo, like fasting, like some mitochondrial supplements like PQQ, CoQ10, doing NAD IVs, things like that could help. Red light therapy. I like the things first and foremost that are just healthy for you, like grounding, sunlight, walking, de-stressing, like we talked about meditation, like gratitude, like getting rid of like we were talking about that we're too sympathetic all the time, meaning not sympathy like caring about people, but sympathetic nervous state where we're too stressed, we're too on all the time, pushing like dopamine and serotonin and catecholamines like epinephrine and norepinephrine. We need to like chill, and that's the parasympathetic state where we're rest and digest. We're just not in that state anymore. Like, used to be people were okay with solitude, people were okay with prayer, and or meditation, or like taking walks by themselves. Or now, like, if someone's alone for a minute, like they need to pick up their phone, they need to like call someone, they need to look at the we're insecure, and like we don't know what to do with ourselves. And I feel like all these things are tying into the autoimmune issues.
I think that's a great, I mean, it's amazing that you even talk about this, because I think most dietitians and nutritionists are going to go straight to, well, like this supplement you need to be on, or this diet you need to be on, where really it's like, let's address the underlying issue of it all, of like, what is the stress that you're dealing with in your life? What can you be doing in order to like turn on that parasympathetic, turn on that rest, relax, digest portion of our body that we need to actually be able to get the nutrients that we need, and get the vitamin D naturally from the sunlight, and be able to step outside and be able to have good conversations with good people, and surround yourself and be at work with good people, and make sure that your everyday to day life you're like feeling fulfilled. Because also most people go to work, and that's like 8 hours of our day, like, let alone driving to work. So whether you're getting stressed out in traffic, and then you get to work and then you're stressed out all day, and you don't like your work environment, you don't like your people you're around, and then you drive home another hour or two stressed out again, and imagine how much of that portion of your life is taking over. And so all of a sudden, that is where you can get autoimmune disease and obesity and chronic pain, fibromyalgia, all these other things, because we're not even addressing the underlying issue, and we just want these things to fix it and to make it go away. But it doesn't work like that.
Exactly. Yeah, we need to think about what we're doing on those fronts with who you have around you. Like, who's your 5 people that are closest to you? Like, are those healthy people that are lifting you up, that are challenging you in the right ways? And what's your life like in terms of satisfaction? Like, are you not satisfied with, like Jen was saying, with your work, with your spouse, with all these things in your life? Like, you need to think about what's contributing to your pain, your inflammation, your unhappiness, to these behaviors that are triggering bad habits, that are triggering you to spin out of control, to feel guilt,
reach for that sugar, or reach for that stuff.
Right. That's where it all starts, is mindset. And happiness is a choice. You need to love yourself, and you need to find ways to be okay with who you are. And I feel like all these things, it comes back to compliance. Like, can you do it for a lifetime? Is this a lifetime decision, or is it a crash thing where you're just unhappy with yourself, you hate yourself, so I'm going to try and lose weight, I'm going to try and get healthy, I'm going to try and get a six-pack, and it doesn't last because you're not loving yourself, you're not changing your life, your lifestyle, the people that are around you, like the job you're at. Like, if you have to quit the job you're at, if you have to quit the person You're seeing if you have to get rid of toxic people in your life, then I think you should do it like reckless abandon.
And it's not always as easy as it sounds to like just love yourself and just be happy and just do all this stuff. It actually takes you getting into the uncomfortable to really observe and gain this awareness. And sometimes it requires going to courses or hiring therapists or hiring coaches and doing other things that make you feel a little uncomfortable so you can get more aware as to everything. Can you talk more about nutrition?
Yes, sorry.
We're talking about the cause of nutrition and where this actually comes from, because it's a lot deeper than I think a lot of us want to own up to and admit. But when it comes to nutrition in general, I think we can agree sugar is super inflammatory.
Yeah. The cause of like a lot of this disease, the mitochondrial dysfunction. You'll see you'll see glycation, blood sugar damage, and you'll see inflammation. So those are things that, like, when your blood sugar's too high chronically, your insulin's too high chronically, when your inflammation's too high chronically, then you run into all these disease states. Almost every disease is tied to elevated levels of inflammation and glycation. So that's where, yes, eating whole food like paleo, or whatever you want to call it, ancestral, I mean, look, you may not know like what a caveman was eating thousands of years ago, but I know what my grandfather was eating 100 years ago, and it wasn't antibiotics and GMOs and RBGH, RBST, and ultra processed food. All these foods are meant to they're engineered foods that are high bliss point foods that we can't stop eating, that we want to overeat, and it puts us in a state of addiction. So those are really hard. Like, that, not only is it unhealthy because they're inflammatory oils that are in these processed foods, that there's sugar, yes, those things are unhealthy, but now we're addicted to them because they're engineered to be that way, and we can't stop eating them. They literally make these foods to have like high fat for mouthfeel, and then high glycemic, so that you feel that dopamine response, and then they have like the crunchy and the sweet and the salty, like McDonald's French fries, or they make beverages that are acidic and sweet and have the effervescence, and then has like a blandness that they'll put in the back end so that you don't feel satisfied when you're drinking it, and you have to keep drinking it so that you get the sweetness and the flavor on the front end. It makes you keep, like, this is a science, and so people are addicted. And people are eating really bad foods that are addictive. If I was to give you a handful of like raw almonds, you wouldn't be overeating those.
No.
And almost any whole food, even if I hand you a steak or something, you're not going to eat 2 steaks. But if I give you like some ultra processed food that's engineered that way, you're going to easily eat, like, you can't just eat one, like the Lay's potato chips. I mean, that's real.
You're going to continue to eat more. That's huge.
Exactly.
Someone brought up kids. It's like, but we're conditioned as like, oh, give your children sweets, and give your children like these little packaged treats, and give your children like, I mean, I know I go over and I will start eating the goldfish that I give to my nieces and nephews, because it is addicting, and it is these little like treats that it's just normal to give them. And also it's like, I remember my sister saying that her doctor says like milk and peanut butter, if you just gave your kids those 2 things, they'd be so healthy. And so it's like, I mean, how do we, it's hard, because now as adults we're told, don't have these foods, like don't turn to them, but yet we've been addicted because that's all we've been growing up with. Like, I grew up on bean and cheese burritos, chocolate milk, where I would like dose it with chocolate, like so much chocolate milk, Nestle's Quick, and bread. Like, that was my diet, literally. So, and I had tons of stomach issues. I've even had a twisted colon in 3 places. Like, I've had a lot of issues, but that's what I knew. And so it's like, how do we start to change it from the kids, or do we start to change it as adults?
Definitely needs to start with the kids. You definitely want to work with your kids so that they're not, like, this is where the conditioning is happening. So, I mean, for me, that's why I'll always be, just like AA, like, you're always an alcoholic. I'm always going to be addicted to these high bliss point sugar foods, because that's how I treated myself when I was young. That was my addiction of choice. So it's better than maybe me of doing like heroin or something like that. But I mean, certainly that was my foundation that was built, and I'll always be fighting that. So it would be great if you can work with your kids and have them, do the things like where they enjoy the colors on their plate, and they have the fresh, how much better fresh is. And I mean, I even think like with like fruits and vegetables. I mean, you think about tomatoes, right? Like a garden fresh tomato is like very red and juicy and just has an amazing taste. And like the tomatoes you get at some salad bar are like pink and spongy and don't have much flavor. Or like a watermelon now, like doesn't have like as much juiciness and sweetness. And it's so true with like all these fruits and vegetables now that are engineered to last long, to survive shipment, whatever. Like they don't bruise, and they just don't taste as good. So having your kids try like garden fresh vegetables, farm to market kind of stuff, like where they actually taste how good fresh and healthy can be. I think that can be powerful. And especially like with kids, like one really powerful thing is take them to the grocery store and have them pick out their meal, and then have them hopefully be involved in prepping it and cooking it, and then they care about it and they want to eat it. It's not just mom made some crap for me.
Or
they
mac
have some
and cheese
involvement.
that was like created or anything like that. So it's like getting more healthier, like real vegetables, real fruit. What else would you suggest? Like, should we be drinking milk? Like, that's always a debate out there as well.
Milk's a tough one. I think the science is out on that. Like, I think it depends on maybe cultures. There's certain cultures that you have to go into like genetic background and individuality. I think certain cultures can deal with milk well. As maybe they have a history of that, and then other cultures don't. It's kind of like Asians with wine, and how they don't have the enzyme ethanol dehydrogenase, and they don't deal with red wine as well. And I think you just have to look at genetics there and how you deal with it. But we weren't meant to have, I mean, realistically, we weren't meant to have milk that's supposed to raise young, like grow a being. Like, so we're not supposed to have like another species milk. And I mean, that doesn't occur anywhere else in nature, right? No animals like getting milk and drinking milk outside of their species.
Right. So it's okay, like when you're like having your mother's milk fresh out of, when you're a baby and you're newborn. But then after that, do we really need to be getting still milk into our system?
I would say no.
I would say no too, but I'm not the expert here.
I would say no. I think you can do without it. I get it, like if it's a price point thing, and you're trying to get the protein, exactly, and it's available, and it's there. But another problem with milk is like a lot of this milk again has the antibiotics, has the glyphosate or whatever in it, has different hormones in it, like the bovine growth hormone and bovine steroids, and so you have to be worried about that kind of stuff too.
So besides, if we're looking at from a protein aspect, because that is a lot of like, okay, your kid, like you want your kid to be healthy, like have some milk, you'll get some calcium and some protein, and then eat the peanut butter, because again you'll get the protein in there and you'll get the fat. So what are some other alternatives to those that can be, see, someone is asking about calcium and protein. So what are some other alternatives that we could do where it's not just feeding them milk?
Calcium is going to be very high in all like the dark leafy green vegetables, like spinach, kale, even things like broccoli. So those would be good sources. I think calcium, I'm a little counter on this, that I think it's over focused on. You can actually run into, like with calcium supplements, like concerns on calcification of your arteries if you're not taking enough vitamin D or getting enough sunshine and getting K2 and things like that in. So I think calcium, again, just eat your vegetables. That would be a big one. Protein, if you're a meat eater, just getting quality meats in. I think that's fairly easy. Hopefully, your kids like chicken and beef and those kinds of things.
Yeah.
Eggs is certainly one of the best sources of, not only does it have the egg white, which has the protein, but in the yolk there's really healthy fats, phospholipids, that help with brain health, and then something called choline that helps with brain health as well. That's really important, especially for a child with a developing brain.
Very good to know. What about, because someone did ask about, well, like chicken, eggs, is that technically considered dairy, and like we're not supposed to have too much dairy?
No.
Okay.
I would say no.
Great. Someone asked about something else. Oh, lactose-free milk.
Yeah. Issue there is lactose is a disaccharide, and that means it's two sugars put together. It's glucose and galactose. When you're breaking it down because your body can't deal with it well because you don't make the lactase enzyme, then you're getting a pre-digested milk, which is higher glycemic because it's higher in glucose. Lactose is actually pretty low glycemic, so you're getting a higher glycemic product, and that's why the lactose-free milk tastes sweeter. So I think there's some issues there that you might tend to overconsume it because it's sweeter. I'd have some concern because you're not making that enzyme already, so maybe you don't deal with the dairy like we were talking about already. So should you be finding ways to kind of work around that, or should you maybe not be having milk?
Yeah, I would say that. What about like difference between soy, coconut, almond, and oat?
I avoid soy like the plague. That is one thing, again, maybe controversial on my end, but soy has phytoestrogens. And phytoestrogens, there's some studies that say it can be helpful if you have cancer. Some studies say that it might promote cancer. There's studies that say it could help with if you're postmenopausal. It could help with bone health. It could hurt bone health. The reason for all this, I think, is because it's a weak estrogen. And there's certain scenarios, like if you're postmenopausal and you don't have estrogen, it could be helpful. But if you're perimenopausal, premenopausal, and you have plenty of estrogen, then it could lower your levels of effective estrogen, and it can do what's called endocrine disruption, where you're actually, all the hormones play into all the other hormones. So estrogen goes into testosterone, goes into progesterone, and all these things, there's a cascade, and you're impairing that by introducing these phytoestrogens. So I'm not a big fan of soy. On occasion, I think it's fine, but not chronically by any means. I think with some of the other ones, like coconut milk, cashew milk, whatever, I think they're good alternatives. If you like the flavor, if you grew up enjoying milk and you want an alternative, but I'd just be careful on the sugar content.
Yeah,
a lot of them are just loaded with sugar.
Yeah, and even what is that? I can never say it right. Carcinogen or carrageenan?
Carrageenan?
Yeah.
Carrageenan?
I can never say
the
it
gums.
Right.
Yeah.
What is so?
It's a thickener.
Is that bad? Because when I go on, like, if I did like Whole30 or something, it says don't get almond milk that has that in it.
Yeah, there's some correlation to it could potentially be a carcinogen. The data isn't super conclusive, but I mean, I think it's best when you don't know and it's not conclusive to avoid it if you can, and there's no reason that you shouldn't be able to avoid it.
Yeah. Okay, let's answer this. Some studies say that whey protein causes a spike in estrogen in men, so is whey safe, or is it better to stick with vegan protein?
Whey protein causes a spike in estrogen in men. I haven't heard that. I know it can be insulinogenic because of certain amino acids, which is actually a good thing, that from whey protein, that you can drive insulin and replete glycogen. You can have an anabolic effect with the amino acids with whey, but estrogen, I don't see why that would be the case, unless like that whey has hormones. Again, it's like treated with the bovine growth hormone, the bovine steroids, or the antibiotics. Potentially antibiotics can be what's called xenoestrogens, where it could affect estrogen levels as well. So I would just look at the source of the whey / the source of the milk, and get a better source that isn't frankenfood.
Personally, I've tried whey products before, and it makes me it
GI
hurts my
distress,
stomach. Yeah, it hurts my stomach. So personally, I don't do whey for that reason.
Yeah, and there's actually more complication even with the casein component of the dairy. There's something called casomorphins that's triggered a lot of potentially autism.
Whoa.
That's one of the biggest effectors potentially of autism they're finding. So that's something to look into, casomorphins, as well as for inflammation, a lot of things. It's a lot of research going on.
Interesting.
Ginseng.
And snakeweed and savage berries. Better ways to eat healthy?
I know ginseng. I don't know savage berries or snake berries and savage weed or whatever it was.
Yeah, I don't know.
I've never heard of those. But ginseng is an adaptogen, and I talked about those yesterday. I'm a big fan of, probably my favorite ones are, and this is great for dealing with stress, like we talked about. Ashwagandha and rhodiola are two of my favorites, and then one for the brain is lion's mane. Yep.
I remember that one. Is soy better than cooking with salt?
Soy better. I'm a huge fan of salt.
Yeah.
I think that's completely false. If you tease out the data, the epidemiologic data that they said salt is bad for you and it's associated with shorter life, if you tease out ultra-processed food from that, which is often high in salt, and you just look at sodium intake, even if it's high and somebody's eating healthy whole food, there is no correlation, and actually the higher the salt level, the longer the life. So I'm all for going back to using salt in your food, as long as it's not driving overconsumption.
Totally. Someone had asked about with making supplements, I don't know if they're still on, they asked a couple times, is it better to just white label through a company, or should you work with a professional to get
You should work with the world's greatest formulator.
Yeah, there you go.
Come on, of course.
Should work with Shawn.
No, you shouldn't white label. White label products are, one size fits all. You don't know the demographic you're trying to work with, and if it's not something that you deeply appreciate and love and feel like you're a part of, then you're not going to feel authentic selling it.
Yeah, I think so too.
So I would rather create something from the ground up that I feel passionate about.
Someone said they eat regularly and balanced, whatever that means, but get hungry every 3 hours. Is it normal?
I think it's normal because your blood sugar adapts to whatever you're doing. People think that they can't do intermittent fasting because they need to eat every 3 hours, but maybe they feel like they were conditioned to eat that way. I know I was raised when I was working out to have the 6 small meals a day or whatever. That's better for your metabolism, and then your body adjusts to that.
Right.
And then you feel like your blood sugar will adapt to that, so that every 3 hours you are in fact hungry, and it does take a little time to readjust. But you can eat the OMAD style, 1 meal a day, or you can eat a couple times a day and do intermittent fasting where you do 4-hour time restricted window, or you can do an 8-hour window. But you'll adjust. It actually gets pretty easy over time. But people think that they can't eat that way, but it only takes a couple weeks.
Totally. What about grains and legumes and stuff? Because there's a lot on that, and it seems to be hard for people to process a lot of these.
Yeah, there's the phytates and oxalates, and I agree. It could be. I think the way we're eating them, we're getting these vegetables and grains that are, again, not treated in the same way, not grown in the same way as we used to. They're not getting rinsed in the right way, like with the beans. It's a problem that we already have, leaky guts. We're already inflamed, so we can't deal with these things very well. And then it's preventing mineral uptake from being done as well. And it is an issue, but again, it's individualized.
Yeah.
I would look at some of those things. Look at the foods that have like nightshades. Are some of the foods that are problematic, and grains, like you're just saying. Like,
Yeah.
so looking at gluten, phytates, oxalates, and seeing like if some of those foods connect with you on like, I felt GI distress. I feel tired when I have them.
I feel bloated.
Exactly.
Yeah. And really, like, that's the listening portion. It's not like, oh, I feel like I want
Right.
Snickers or I feel like I want candy. Like, it's really more about, like, after I eat this food, how am I feeling? After I eat these grains, and then seeing if I took grains out for a week, would it change at all? Like, how would I feel?
Yeah, exactly.
Here's one of my girlfriends. Any information on melatonin for children with ADHD or with significant difficulty sleeping?
That's a tough one because melatonin is a hormone and it does help with sleep, but one of the problems is like when we're young, we have plenty of it, or we should. So it's like hormone replacement therapy essentially. It's fine, I think, as you start aging, because it's declining with age, and it's no different than us using testosterone or estrogen or some other things. But with someone that's young, they should have tons of melatonin at night. I think the problem is blue light devices and getting too much screen time probably for your child, and that is affecting probably the ADHD. So be cognizant of screen time during the day, but especially the last 3 hours of the day, and especially if they're in a dark room with this thing right up to their face. It literally blocks the pituitary from producing the melatonin. So that might be a big part of this. And then if there's sleep debt, your neurons don't work as well, and then they have hyperactivity because they're like tapping into all these corticosteroid, or they're tapping into epinephrine, norepinephrine, cortisol, like all that stuff. Like so, that could be your source of ADHD, which means like that you're running through glucose and you're having like spikes in glucose and dropping in glucose. So that's where their behaviors are all over the place, and that can all start with the sleep and the devices.
Yeah, interesting. Okay, you talked a little bit about Adderall too. She reminded me, like, for Adderall, limit screen time to only one movie per week.
That would be amazing. Okay. You might have some withdrawal from that, but yeah.
What else do you think? Is it like food related? Could it be
the ADHD?
Yeah.
Yeah, anything that, certainly like avoiding the sugar content, is that's going to play into this, like up and down. And when you are like hypoglycemic, you're going to like be reaching for things that are high glycemic. So he's going to feel bottomed out. He's going to feel crabby and angry and irritable. And then the one solution for that is the instant fix is going to be sugar stuff. He's going to want juice, soda, candy, like stuff like that. And then he'll be good for 10 minutes, and then he'll go, high glycemic and running around like crazy, and you'll say he's hyperactive.
What about Adderall? Is there a more natural form that we can start taking for our brains and our bodies?
Adderall is horrible. It's literally an amphetamine, and it's kind of feeding into this whole thing where I'm talking about like you're in a hypoglycemic state, you run through all your adrenals, and you need like amphetamines to kind of put you at a balanced state, which is really sad. That's like saying like you need adrenaline to make you feel balanced. That is not a good place to be, certainly chronically. I would certainly look for other ways, like we were talking about before, like walking, like grounding, like putting down the devices and reading, and
what are some natural supplementations that people can do?
So going back to those adaptogens. Yeah, those would be perfect. Like, so the ashwagandha, the rhodiola, things like that, ginseng. Yeah,
amazing. All right, guys, I do have to go because I'm going to be teaching soon. He's going to be talking soon. We're out here at Paleo FX and dropping all the knowledge bombs for all the people.
So this is Austin.
It's beautiful
Lost.
out
And
here.
this is Paleo Effects behind us, and this is us.
So we wanted to just like come on and share some stuff, and I'm so appreciative for like this guy's got all the information. So I think that if you guys have more questions, DM me, and I would love to. Maybe we can hop on if a live will possibly work. We've tried before, it never works. But if you guys have more questions, I think it could be fun to like continue to come on and ask questions.
Rob.
Hey!
The Genius Company.
Yes, I know him
Awesome
too.
supplements, cool.
Yeah, so if you guys have more questions, like let me know. Go over to Shawn's page, check him out. I tagged him right here. It's Zone Halo. And ask us questions, and we'd love to come on again and be able to answer. I think this was really fun. I hope you guys got a lot of benefit out of it. And if you missed some of the beginning, go back, because where the true root cause comes from a lot of these things are what we talked about in the very beginning. The boring stuff that you guys don't want to hear is the most important stuff.
It's true.
Because there's not a one size fits all, and there's just not one fix. It's a whole process, because you're a whole person, and it's about treating the uniqueness within you.
Exactly. Love you guys. Thank you. And I love this girl right here.
Yay!
She's awesome. See you
Bye,
guys.
guys. Oops.